and Denise Beach.
Hello, Canna friends. Thanks for joining us. This is our third episode of Hoosier Cannabis Times. I want to thank the First Church of Cannabis for hosting us again. Couldn't do it without you. We do know we had some technical difficulties on our last episode. We got all the kinks worked out. Thanks for hanging in there with us. You see a new face here next to me. Neil had to step out this week, but we welcome Jack Kane. He is on our board of directors at iNormal also, and is just as knowledgeable as Neil, I would say.
Well, I haven't been working as long as Neil, but I know a little bit about cannabis. So. No, it's great to be here. First Church Cannabis has got a great facility and helping us out a great deal and really spreading the word of cannabis and all the wonders it can do. So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to have this discussion.
Definitely. So last week we went over the More and Safe Act, some federal bills. This week we're going to go over a couple more federal cannabis bills that are floating around out there. We're also going to touch on the meeting that 3 of our board members had with Attorney General Todd Rokita here in Indiana. Very great meeting that happened. But before we get into that, we have a video coming up with Senators Schumer, Wyden, and Booker, and their thoughts on cannabis.
And really, really exciting news here. So listen up.
Hi, I'm Senator Chuck Schumer. I'm the Democratic leader. I'm so proud to be here with 2 of my best and taller colleagues, Cory Booker and Ron Wyden. It's not that often I'm the shortest senator in the group. But we're here to talk about a very serious subject, which is the decriminalization of marijuana, to take it off the federal list that makes it as serious a drug as heroin or cocaine. Is that ridiculous? And for decades, young men who were arrested with a small amount of marijuana in their pockets served long prison terms, and then they had a felony record and could never make themselves right. This was long overdue. And then what we learned is when states decriminalized or legalized, all the horrible stories that people said, crime rates would go up, people's drug use would go up, never materialized. One of the first states it happened in was yours, Ron.
Correct.
Right? And isn't that what happened?
Absolutely. And look, the bottom line here, as the leader, Senator Schumer, has said, is it is long past time to address the harms of the failed war on drugs. And my state was one of the first, and people went to the polls and they said this marijuana prohibition, folks, just doesn't work. And certainly communities of color have been devastated by these failed policies. And I also want to highlight a point the 3 of us have talked about, and that is so many small cannabis businesses have been hurt by this. And in effect, they said, you know, our people voted to legalize, and then all of these out-of-date federal policies came along after the people of Oregon, for example, voted to legalize it and got in the way of our small businesses.
And now the American people realize this, that the making marijuana such a serious offense, instead of taking it off the list and decriminalizing it, makes no sense whatsoever. There are many reasons. One reason, freedom. If people want to use it and it doesn't do harm, just like Oregon showed, let them do it. Second is the issue that so many lives have been wasted because marijuana has been listed as something as bad as heroin. But third, it has so hurt communities of color. And one of the things we want to do is not simply decriminalize, but make sure that records are expunged so that people don't live their lives as if they committed the most dastardly felony because they smoked marijuana. And second, we want to make sure that the resources, the money that comes in from the legalization and selling of marijuana goes back to the communities of color that have had borne so much of this burden. And Cory's been a leader in this whole issue, but particularly pointing out how certain communities were so badly affected.
Well, there's a lot of reasons people should be excited, and the first is the 2 gentlemen standing to my left. They are 2 of the more powerful people in the United States Senate. You have the majority leader and the chairman of the Finance Committee. This is a tremendous trio we now have.
But we've got you.
I appreciate that, and to be a part of this.
And we're the first caucus. I'm the first leader of a caucus to come out for decriminalization. He helped persuade me to do it.
It's historic to have this. So if you are watching this, that's one thing to be excited. But the second thing to be excited about, a lot of states are moving for just legalization. We are actually, and you heard the remarks of both of my friends, that this is about restorative justice. This is not a problem in the past. In 2019, there were more marijuana arrests, and most of them, over 90% for possession only, more arrests like that than all violent crime arrests combined. And the problem
Isn't
is,
that incredible?
yes, and the problem is that it's not everybody that's getting arrested. This is not a war on drugs, it's a war on people, and certain people. Veterans are disproportionately arrested for possession of marijuana. Low-income people, disproportionately arrested. People with mental health challenges, disproportionately arrested. And of course, as you said, Chuck, black and brown communities are targeted. In fact, African Americans and whites have the same usage rates of marijuana, but blacks are 3.7 times more likely. And that's why what Chuck Schumer said is so urgent. It's not just about creating an environment where states are legalizing. It's about restorative justice. And that's a number of things. That's one, making sure that we expunge records. Don't talk about free adult use of marijuana without talking about expunging records. Number two, the tax money. This is going to be a multi-billion-dollar business.
Yeah.
Those tax receipts should be reinvested in those
communities that were hurt. So we want to move this bill. It's time. The American people are for it. States that you would never think, when they had a ballot initiative, have said, let's decriminalize. We want to move this, and we urge all of our friends out there to let their senators, let their congressmen know this is long overdue. It's an issue of justice, 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 as well as freedom.
And millions of Americans now, like the folks I have the honor to represent, have gone to the polls, and they have said that they agree with Senator Schumer and Booker and I. And I don't think they're going to accept any more dawdling from the federal government. It's kind of like the federal government's been in a time warp. And one of the things we said in Oregon as we debated this, how about we come up with some policies that at least get our state into the right century on these issues? And my sense is with the leadership of Leader Schumer and Senator Booker, we're going to do everything we can at the Finance Committee, which will have jurisdiction over some of the issues that my friends have talked about, like taxes, where the small business person is always telling the three of us they're not getting a fair shake. We've got a real shot now at making progress.
Time to move. We're ready.
And one thing I love that my colleague who's the chairman of the Finance Committee understands and focuses on is the fact that this is also making sure that these tremendous business opportunities are being created. This multi-billion-dollar business is not just the sort of big Wall Street-backed money interest. It's actually a fairness. Yes.
We don't want the big tobacco companies and the big liquor companies to swoop in and take over. The legislation we have will make sure that smaller businesses in communities of color get the advantage, because the communities of color have paid the price for decades. They should at least get something back.
Amen.
The three of us are going to be introducing legislation shortly, and it's exciting and it's imperative, and we will get it done. Okay, good work, my friends.
So I don't know about you guys, but that video had me pumped. For the Democratic leader and the Finance Commissioner to be that much on board with cannabis reform, things are definitely happening. They made some great points. Jack, what did you think?
That's really excellent. I've not seen, in the 20 years I've been following and involved with cannabis, I've never seen legislators that powerful, like you said, the powerful legislators, come out and say, hey, this is something we want to do, it needs to be done, and to really have a good grasp of the underlying issues and why it needs to be done. And three of the big points that they brought up, which I really liked, as opposed to some of the other legislation, which we'll get into in a minute, he talked about eliminating the schedule, taking how it was ridiculous that cannabis was on the same Schedule 1, the same as heroin and methamphetamine. He realized that's ridiculous. That's just common sense reality. So that's good. The other thing he talked about is trying to make sure that local businesses, get the majority of the benefits of the cannabis legislation. to prevent large corporations, okay, some of the multinationals from coming in and dominating the market. That's one of the things we've been talking about, which is extremely important.
Definitely, they're already set up and ready to take over, Big Tobacco is, and I'm really glad that they're addressing that so that your local farms, your small-time guys can still have their foot in the door.
Right, and as part of that too, and this is one of the things that's been sorely missing in the Republican legislation that's been proposed, is the restorative justice, okay? The fact that everybody realizes that facts dictate, statistics show that blacks are 3 times more likely to get arrested for marijuana conviction, for marijuana possession charges, than whites, okay? And so that communities of color have been adversely affected by this, much more than the white people. And what this bill is going to do is going to make sure that, once again, that some of the jobs not only go to local businesses, but are set aside and going to go to the people in local communities of color, which will help their unemployment and really be helpful for them. Record expungement is one of the big things we're talking about.
Well, and that
so this
was
is going to be
huge.
really helpful.
We talked about that last week with the MORE Act. They said the communities that have been hurt the most have benefited the least.
Exactly.
So I love that they're touching on this, the MORE Act is touching on this, because it wasn't that long ago when you got caught with weed, you had a felony.
Yeah.
You can't do anything with a
Right.
felony on your record. You have to
Exactly.
check mark that box on your application for a small business loan. Nobody wants to give a felon a job or
Right.
money.
Yeah.
So the
So-
expungement was huge.
Yeah, this is a really good step. I hope that this legislation gets passed. Obviously, we need to contact the federal legislators and get them on board with this. But it was a great development, I think.
Definitely. Now, Schumer is going to unveil his new legislation tomorrow?
Tomorrow, I think it is. So we don't even have a Senate bill number or anything. So
Okay.
this is all brand new, hot off the presses stuff, and it's extremely exciting. We'll see what happens, but it's very, very good step in the right direction.
Okay, well, we'll definitely stay on top of it for you guys. I'm sure on our next episode, we'll have a lot more information, and we will definitely be keeping you in the loop on what's going on with that.
Absolutely.
Till then, the federal bills that are out there right now, the first one we're gonna go over is HR 3105, which was introduced 5/11 of 21 by Representative David Joyce. He is a Republican out of Ohio.
That also, excuse me for interrupting, that
Yeah.
also has Don Young, the Republican from Arkansas, is a co-sponsor of that.
Okay,
So,
okay.
so this is
Two
real.
Republicans.
These are 2 Republicans that are coming out and saying, "Hey, we need to do something about cannabis." So
At least they're talking about it,
Yeah.
so that's helpful. The name of the bill, it's Common Sense Cannabis Reform for Veterans, Small Business, and Medical Professionals Act. Now, this is a fairly new bill, it had a lot of legalese in it, it didn't really have a summary online. So Jack and I were kind of going back and forth as far as, we aren't 100% sure where they were getting with it, but we'll let you know what we got out of it. And once it gets a little bit further, they'll have a summary and it'll make a lot more sense. Right now, it states that it is to limit the application of federal laws to the distribution and consumption of marijuana and for other purposes. And the one that kind of had us wondering was the prohibition on shipping or transportation, that it can't cross state lines. Jack, how did you take it?
Yeah, the biggest thing here is, first of all, there's 2 Republicans, and they're saying that they want to remove cannabis from the controlled substance schedule completely, which is
Okay.
exactly what needs to be done.
Definitely.
Okay, and it's going to provide protection for cannabis-related financial industries. Okay, this is what like Safe Banking Act was all about. So that's very good too. And it's also going to provide blanket protection for veterans who use medical cannabis in accordance with state laws. Exactly what that means, we're not really sure. I think one of the things it's still, and I don't understand what their wording is. It's very legalese stuff, so it's hard to determine exactly what the intent is and what they're going to do. It said it still forbids interstate shipping and transportation, which we're confused about. My take is that if you're a veteran that's using cannabis legally, they're not going to have any prohibitions on that. But if you're in Michigan and using cannabis illegal and you drive to see your friend in Louisville, Kentucky, and go through Indiana, you might still be subject to Indiana laws against that. So I was confused about that.
Where I took it as more of a, like how Schumer said in the video, that he doesn't want big tobacco taking over so that you would not be able to carry marijuana across state lines.
Or ship it from
So,
other
or
countries.
ship it from other, a semi truck full or whatever. So you don't have all the farms in one state and it's going all over. So we'll probably find out more as this
Yeah,
bill
and
goes
that's
forward.
brand new, May of 2021. I think it's been sent to committee for I think it was a financial committee, a veterans committee, and what's it?
Yeah, it went to, it was referred to the Committee on Energy and Commerce and to the committees on the Judiciary and Financial Services.
Yeah, so it still hasn't heard in any committee, so it's all brand new. But so that's a step in the right direction. It's really good to see the Republicans coming out in favor of this, especially a Republican from Arkansas.
And Ohio?
Well, Ohio has had medical marijuana for
That's
some
true.
time. Okay, so they're
That's true.
at least realistic about it. But Arkansas, they're I'm not sure about how progressive they are down there. One of the things that they were talking about too, I think, yeah. Well, I think one of the things they're trying to do here, in one of the synopses I'm reading, is that one of the things they don't do is do any social justice things like Schumer was talking about, okay? Working with the communities that have been affected by this negatively.
And I think
And so-
that's huge.
That's huge too, and I think this is, what's sincere, this is a really good way for the Republicans to get on board, okay, with doing some kind of marijuana reform, cannabis reform, without having to do any of the social justice things.
Right.
Okay, so it didn't work.
Right.
So,
So at least they're saying they're on board.
at least, yeah, it's a huge
Conversations
huge step in the right direction, so that's great.
Definitely, definitely. The next one we saw here was HR 2588. It was introduced 4/15 of this year by Barbara Lee, who is a Democrat out of California. That is the Veterans Medical Marijuana Safe Harbor Act. This one I love. The bill provides guidance related to veterans and medical marijuana that shall be in effect for 5 years. So my biggest question was, what are the penalties that vets get right now if they're using medical marijuana or even recreational?
Well, and I'm not a veteran, so I don't know exactly, but I have a lot of friends who are veterans and a lot of veterans that are involved in the cannabis activity, all right, and are using cannabis very effectively. I've had more than one veteran look me straight in the eye and say, "This has saved my life." Get him off opioids, stop destroying his internal organs. He's not in a fog anymore. He can think and act. So this is very important. But from my understanding is when the veterans go in, they want to talk about it to their doctor. The VA doctors are prohibited from even discussing medical marijuana with their patients, okay? Let alone recommending it, let alone giving them a prescription for it or anything like that. So this is huge because at least the realizing the VA is going to realize that there's definitely some medical benefit for this. All of the 4 veterans organizations approve of this nationally, so this should be a no-brainer, especially to help veterans that have PTSD and many other issues.
Well, I have a vet friend that, he has PTSD. They tried to prescribe him the PTSD cocktail, which Jason's gone over. And he said it was the worst feeling he ever had in his life when he had to do that.
Right,
So
absolutely horrible.
He medicates with cannabis, but I know he does get some repercussions. I haven't talked to him in depth.
Yeah, I
But
think
he does get repercussions from the VA.
if they do, from what I understand, if they do admit to their doctor that they're using cannabis, they can immediately be taken off of any other medication that they may need. So this is, there's a lot of details about what you can do and.
Speaking specifically, the vet, as far as this bill goes, the vet can use, possess, or transport medical marijuana in accordance with state or native tribal laws, which to me kind of goes into what the other one was. If they go from, say, Illinois to Michigan, which are both legal, they wouldn't have a problem.
Right.
It also says the VA doctor is actually allowed to discuss with the vet the use of medical marijuana as a treatment in a legal state. And this is where you were saying that doctors can't even discuss it.
Yeah, that's
So-
the whole thing is now it opens it up and say, yeah, you can at least talk about the issue. which
Do
is good.
you think VA doctors will be on board with that, though?
Well,
Because just because you can doesn't mean they will.
Well, from what I understand, once again, I have to repeat, I'm not a veteran. I've never been to a veterans hospital. I've never talked to a VA doctor. But this is all coming from people I know and friends I've been associated with for many years. And they're saying that a lot of the doctors are saying, hey, I can't do anything. I would if I could, but I can't talk about it.
Okay.
So I think this is a huge step forward. This is really a good bill, I think.
Okay, so as long as we can get the doctors on board to help support the vets, and maybe some vet that never even tried it, knows anything about it, they can get the education and the guidance they need.
And the help that they need. And that's been referred to Energy and Commerce, Judiciary, and Veterans Affairs Committees. And it's just, it was introduced 4/15, and it really hasn't done anything yet, so.
Okay, it also lets the VA doctor can recommend complete forms or register the vet for participation in medical marijuana treatment programs in accordance with state and tribal laws. So will they be able to write medical marijuana cards, you think?
I don't think so. I would be surprised if they would, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
The big thing is, and once again, it's state law. So they're saying, hey, listen, if it's illegal in Indiana, I don't know if the VA hospital and the VA doctors in Indiana will be able to talk about that. Okay, but they certainly can in the legal states.
Which is, would that be in a federal, because I think the VA hospitals are federal.
Right, but one of the things they
and
talk
so-
about though is they talk about in conjunction, okay, in accordance with applicable state law.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
Well, the applicable state law in Indiana, thanks to our leadership, is
Governor
it is still, yeah, it's still illegal, so, we'll talk about that in a while.
Right.
So that's a huge step forward into before the VA had nothing to do with it. It was proscribed by law that they can't even talk about. So this is a huge step in the right direction.
Okay, the bill also does require the VA to report on the effects of medical marijuana on vets' pain, which is exciting because I think anybody that can get off opioids is a win.
Yeah. Well, and what they're trying to do is to make it palatable to some people who are maybe not pro for it. They're going to say, listen, it's only 5 years, and we're going to study it and then report back on it, okay? Because it's really, we're not real sure it's going to work.
Because there's no studies out there.
Yeah, right.
The bill also requires the VA to report on the relationship between state-approved medical marijuana treatment programs and program access, opioid use, and abuse reduction. I don't know of any states that have treatment programs that involve medical marijuana, either vet or civilian.
I think I think what they're talking about here is the fact that, okay, some states have set up medical marijuana programs, okay, and they just want to test the efficiency, do these programs work?
Okay.
So they don't have a special program, it's just that we got medical marijuana, and in some cases, some states are saying you got to have these 16 different disorders where you can use it. So it's just, once again, trying to get some data on results off that. So.
Okay. So I really like this bill.
That's
To me,
great.
It's really exciting.
It's a really good bill.
It lets vets have their own choice for their health care, their medicine that they want to use, and have some medical guidance to it, rather than just going out there.
And what bill is that again?
That is HR 2588.
So it's a House bill.
It's a House bill by Barbara Lee, who's a Democrat out of California. The next one we want to discuss very briefly is the Senate Bill 1183. It was introduced April 15th of 21. Senator Schatz, the Democrat out of Hawaii. It's a Veterans Medical Marijuana Safe Harbor Act. The way I read it, it's exactly the same as the one we just discussed.
Yeah, they used almost the exact wording in both the bills. And this is just a situation where they want the House has come up with the Bill 2588, okay, and they want the Senate to come up with the same bill. So when they go to a compromise committee, when they finally want to draft the legislation, it'll be easier to do a bipartisan bill.
Okay,
it won't be a fresh start for the senators. They will have already been introduced to this and heard that bill. So it's very common. They did the same thing here in Indiana with the last bill, 201, Senate Bill 201, I think.
Yes, yeah, it started.
Because Lucas had introduced a bill in the House, and then Young introduced one in the Senate, and that's when it came down. So that's fairly standard operating procedure for them.
With that being said, it sounds like this should go through pretty easily?
Well, no, not necessarily. Just because they've got two bills in the legislature doesn't mean that they're going to do anything about it.
Okay.
It's a nice start. It's a good thing that the Senate is recognizing that as well as the House.
Okay, and with it being worded the same, hopefully that does for our vets
That makes
out
it
there.
much easier in a compromise committee when they come together to do the final trial.
Okay, all right, sounds good. The last bill we're going to be discussing tonight is HR 365, which was introduced January of this year by Representative Gregory Stube. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Republican out of Florida, another Republican. I'm not super thrilled with this. It's called the Marijuana 1 to 3 Act of 2021. Basically, it moves marijuana to a lower schedule of the Controlled Substances Act. Didn't the MORE Act do this?
Yeah, the MORE Act does this and much more. If everybody's familiar with the different scheduling, okay, the Controlled Scheduled Act, which was created during the Nixon administration to put down a list of drugs that they could go after and criminalize. And the Schedule 1 is bills it out or substances that have no medical use and high potential for abuse, okay? Heroin, methamphetamine, okay, they're talking about LSD, MDMA, ecstasy.
And that's where
And
marijuana
that's
is
where
at right now.
marijuana is right now. And that's one of the things that Schumer talked about earlier, saying that's ridiculous to have marijuana listed in the same category as those. So, and then Schedule 2 are those that are less, they do have some medical benefit, but are less addictive. Coincidentally, cocaine is on Schedule 2, okay? I would defy anybody to say that cocaine is not addictive. That's just kind of ridiculous. The whole scheduling thing is ridiculous. So
Yeah.
this is a cheap attempt by the Republicans to act like they're doing something to move legislation forward, okay? Say, hey, it's not going to be number 1, it's going to be number 3. It doesn't say anything about, penalties may be reduced,
And
but
they
it's shuffling, it's moving things around to act like they're doing something. It really is not going to do anything substantial at all.
And Schedule 3 is described as a drug, substance, or chemical that has less potential for abuse than a Schedule 1 or 2 substance, and then it has currently accepted medical value, has lower moderate risk of dependence if abused. Now, Vicodin falls under the Schedule 3. So I'm not 100% sure how Schedule 3, Vicodin and marijuana are in the same schedule, because Vicodin is highly addictive, your opioids are highly addictive, we know that. Marijuana is not, so.
Yeah, this is, the whole idea of the Controlled Substances Act was a cheap attempt to make it easy for them to put things on to make it illegal.
Okay.
The whole idea of the war on drugs was politically motivated. We know that for a fact. John Ehrlichman, one of the policy directors for Nixon, said, of course we knew this. They were going after the black community and the anti-war community.
Well, they definitely won that.
Because they, were they were not supporting Nixon at all. So, and Ehrlichman, you can look up, there's quotes online that talk about this. Ehrlichman said, so what we could do, we knew we could not go after them directly. But by criminalizing marijuana, we could go after the anti-war people. By criminalizing heroin, we could go after the black community. And that's what they did, very effectively. So in order to, instead of having to say, go back to Congress every time to say, hey, we want to make this drug illegal. Okay, hey, we want to make this drug illegal. What they did is created the schedule. So all they have to do, anything on this schedule is illegal. So all they have to do is go and say, hey, we want to take this substance and put it on the Controlled Substances Act. And all of a sudden it's illegal.
Now, does the FDA do that when they're approving a drug, like
No,
say pharmaceutical?
This has nothing to do with FDA.
Okay.
This is the DEA thing, and it can be changed immediately if you had a DEA administrator. He can immediately say, okay, look, we're going to drop it off schedule. Okay, we're not going to enforce the law. So this is.
So is it the DEA who decide which drugs go into which schedule? Okay, okay. So they made their point, they definitely beat down different neighborhoods,
Right,
different
exactly.
socioeconomic groups.
Exactly, and a lot of the anti-war activists who were obviously involved in using cannabis got arrested and thrown in jail for a very long time. We've still got people who are in jail now for things that happened back in the 70s.
So if these would go through, like say the MORE Act, the expungement, that kind of thing, would those people be let out of jail? Would they, how?
Expungement just means it's wiped out of the record. I don't think that they're going to release them,
Okay.
from prison, but they are going to expunge the record for those, so that it won't appear on there. Now, coincidentally, the thing that's interesting, the former prosecutor, Marion County prosecutor Terry Curry, who just passed away, sadly, great guy, he was one of the leaders in the nation of doing criminal expungements right here in Marion County. So many years ago, there was an article in the New York Times that talked about expungement, and Terry Curry was one of the leading proponents in the country. So he's been doing this for a long time for low-level marijuana offenses.
Okay.
So the extension that Ryan Mears did was part of the work Terry Curry had done.
Now, what do you know about the legal states? Have most of the other legal states done expungements?
I really don't know exactly. I know that that's on discussion of a lot of them, but exactly which ones have and which ones haven't, I don't know. But,
So I do like that these federal ones are, hopefully when it does get legal here in Indiana, I'm very confident, it's gonna happen.
yeah, the world's going to end someday too. No,
It is,
I think that having something done on a federal level, okay, is going to immediately help our activity here in Indiana.
Definitely.
And it will put those who are prohibitionists, Governor Holcomb, Wendy McNamara, and others, it'll put them on the defensive and box them in and say, okay, why are you really continuing to do this prohibition? prohibition has never worked. It did, alcohol prohibition was an abysmal failure and ended up in millions of people dying. And why they want to continue the prohibition with cannabis is just absurd. It defies logic.
Right, right.
So hopefully a lot of these bills on the federal level will make it easier for us.
Well, and hopefully that Indiana will learn from other states, the federal level, and when we write our bills, expungement will be right there in the bill to begin with. It won't have to be something to revisit.
Yeah, and the good thing, it's like Jim Lucas says all the time. He says, listen, we're not recreating the wheel here.
Right.
Okay?
All we have to do is copy and paste. Copy and paste.
Exactly.
It's pretty
We've
simple.
got 33 other, states and localities that have adopted this, so we've got a blueprint about how to go forward on this.
Yes, and I know Holcomb's not aware of this, but there's studies. There's lots of studies done. He wants more research. He wants more studies. They're done.
It's just a ploy for them to not address the issue.
But luckily, they've said that once it's federally decriminalized, then we'll move here in Indiana. So we're just waiting for them to keep their words. Yeah. So that's what's going on the federal level. I know this is the Hoosier Cannabis Times. We want to know what's going on here in Indiana. There is still stuff going on. I know our session is over right now. They were
Right.
talking about a special session this summer, but they're not going to touch this.
Well,
It's a budget thing, isn't it?
No, the special session this summer is for the census.
Oh, okay.
Redistricting.
Okay.
Gerrymandering really since they're in charge, but they call it redistricting.
Gotcha. But they are starting to get ready, I'm sure, having thoughts, their backdoor meetings, everything for what they're gonna do next year. So luckily, 3 of our board members got to sit down with Attorney General Todd Rokita. He was very open to meeting with us. He had some great questions. He actually gave them a list of questions beforehand so that they weren't caught off guard. They could do the research. Jason and Shelley, you could not ask for 2 harder workers for cannabis reform. I mean, those
Absolutely.
2 had their foot on the ground. I should say tire on the
they're-
road,
Yeah, rubber to the road.
nonstop,
And they're
nonstop.
with the,
They-
the pedal to the metal too. They're
Always.
all about it.
They're everywhere. They're out there. They are our people. So here's a video of them recapping how the meeting went with Attorney General Todd Rokita.
Hello, I'm Captain Jason Lee Straw, U.S. Air Force retired and former critical care air transport nurse. This is my wife, Shelley. She's a former ICU nurse, and we would like to review our meeting with Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita. First off, I'd like to thank one of our board members on Normal, Catherine, for setting up the meeting. She'd been working with him for months to get the meeting in place and to find out the questions that he had. And Shelley, how did you think the meeting went?
Well, I think Catherine came out very strong talking about the opioid addiction in Indiana and the death of her son, and also the economic impact on Indiana by seeing all the cars in the dispensaries in Michigan. So Catherine's testimony or story was very powerful. And I felt like they listened, they were compassionate, they asked great questions. They were very, very welcoming to us, which really surprised most of us, to be quite honest with you. Because we don't always get that reception, do we, Jason?
No, it can be quite hostile sometimes, and I've run across that in some hearings.
Yeah.
The thing that really got me is Todd Rokita was well organized. He had questions that he gave us beforehand that he wanted to answer, which were questions like, how does cannabis deal with traffic safety? I answered that question very easily, very quickly by referencing the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which said marijuana and cocaine has no increase in traffic accidents.
And he seemed pretty okay with that answer. He was like, oh, okay, wow. Let me see that. You looked at the research.
Yeah, I
looked at the research.
I put the reference on there so he could check it and verify it. The other next question he had was workplace safety and testing. People that he talked to who own businesses are concerned about their employees' safety. It's hard to find employees in Indiana, so it's a valid concern to
Big
know.
concern right now, especially.
To know first, can we identify if people are intoxicated with the substance, and then second, what can we do to determine the level of intoxication, we provided those links also to him, and he seemed fairly confident or appreciative of the information we gave him. The last question was treating opioid addictions. And that came out during the discussion because of Catherine's testimony. So
He asked,
Todd,
was it a gateway drug, correct?
yes, it was a gateway drug. But Todd Rokita allowed us to go back, find the research, and then send him an email to his office so he could review it for later. Now, one of the references that we gave about gateway theory and opioid cannabis treatment, cannabis being used to treat opioids, we had
Dr. Uma. She is a Harvard graduate doctor who's not written an opioid prescription in 8 years, and she's amazing. I actually messaged her and asked if she would help, and she said definitely. She would definitely help us. So she gave us her email and her phone number so that we can give it to the Attorney General and his staff to get a hold of her.
And on this link, we will provide the references that we used to give Todd Rokita the information that he needed. So we hope you enjoyed this review and it was beneficial to you. And if you need to use any of it, feel free.
Thank you.
And we'll talk to you later.
So that was Jason and Shelley, like I said, and you probably heard in the video, Jason's retired Air Force, critical care nurse. Shelley was an ICU nurse, so they've seen what things can do, especially opioids.
Right.
Catherine, huge thank you to her. She is the one that actually got the ball rolling, set up the meeting with Mr. Rokita, and put herself out there with her testimony about her son passing away from opioid use. And I think that's one of the driving forces she has for marijuana
certainly,
legalization.
and this is, once again, I think this is a milestone, or could be a milestone. It's a milestone in fact that at least you're talking about. I mean, Attorney General Rokita has been historically extremely anti-cannabis. He at one point was saying that anybody that smokes marijuana ought to be arrested. Anybody, across the board. I know whether he was doing that for publicity purposes or party purposes, I don't know. But to actually come out and say that in today's day and age is really on the extreme. So for him then to say, yes, he would take a meeting with us and actively discuss it and be involved, I think is huge.
Yeah, and had some really great questions,
Yeah.
they said, from impaired use, how
Yeah,
that
seemed
works.
like he was really involved with that, which is, at this point, we've been through this for many, many years. I've been involved for 15 years, and we always hear about, oh yeah, we're going to do something, and nothing ever comes to fruition. So we'll wait and see, but this is certainly a great potential harbinger for good in the future.
Definitely, I think that's how things get handled is start dialogue, start conversation.
You're right, and then all the legislators that we've met with dozens over the years. They keep saying, the Republicans we talk to, they're the ones in charge, obviously, keep saying, change takes time. It takes a long time. You need to keep working on it and be patient. We're going to be optimistic and say that this is a really good thing that Mr. Rokita is doing this. I don't know what follow-up we have with him. But this is a good thing. No doubt.
Well, and for him to come out and say everyone that should smoke should be,
Arrested.
I think a lot of politicians say what they think their constituents wants to hear.
Right.
And this is a taboo subject. A lot of people cannot or won't come out and say, I'm for legalization, be it for their jobs, for their kids, for whatever. But I think a lot more of them are finding out their constituents are for legalization.
This is a positive electoral move.
Definitely.
Okay.
They already smoke it, ingest it, whatever, or they want to. So I think more of them are coming to that realization and the economic impact that it has to arrest everybody who has a joint or a couple grams.
There were 22,000 in 2018. There were 22,000 arrests for small possession of marijuana.
And just the cost.
And the question I have, and the question everybody should be asking their elected officials is, okay, what good did the state of Indiana accomplish by arresting these people for possessing small amounts of marijuana? Please explain that to me. That's a question that should be on every person's mind when they talk to the legislature or any elected official. And it should be one of the things that the media is talking about all the time. Okay, we know it's illegal. What good is done by continuing this prohibition?
Right.
And
And the only way to let them know, you need to let them know. It can be completely, your neighbors don't need to know, your kids' teachers don't need to know, your boss doesn't need to know. But you can contact your legislature and tell them, I think it should be legal.
yeah.
You know, nobody else has to know except for them. They need to know that 78%, what was the last number, 78% of Hoosiers?
Yeah, 78% on up, depending on what demographic and what poll you use. But the vast majority of Hoosiers prefer to change some laws.
Right,
Okay.
right.
And the biggest thing is, one of the senators from Hawaii, Senator Gabby, I think, was quoted saying, you know, whether you like or dislike marijuana is really irrelevant. And the question is, what should we do, if anything, to people who are using that? That's the question. No more studies and medical effects, none of that. Should we continue to arrest people for using this substance? And I don't think that there's any good reason for doing that.
Right, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah,
Because even if you don't partake, you don't want to, whatever, do you care if other people do?
exactly. It's supposed to be a free country. Okay, they talk about freedom and free. Well, okay, we're really not free to use medical marijuana, are we?
Right, right, 100%.
Yeah.
So, we wanted to follow up with, we went over what Clarence Thomas had to say on our last podcast. Neil went over it. It was, for him to, the most conservative Supreme Court justice, to come out and say the marijuana laws are antiquated, that speaks volumes to me.
Yeah, once again, there's, you know, hopefully the dominoes are falling when you got hardcore drug warriors saying this kind of thing.
Yeah, and take a look.
Yeah.
A Supreme Court justice is calling federal marijuana laws into question. Justice Clarence Thomas says a 2005 ruling from the court upholding federal laws that ban the drug may now be out of date. His comments come as the court declines to hear an appeal of marijuana dispensary that was denied federal tax breaks. Justice Thomas says because of the hodgepodge of federal policies on pot, federal laws against it may no longer make sense.
Okay, so as you can see, if Clarence Thomas thinks that they're antiquated, which Neil always says that justice works at glacier speed. But I think a lot of things are happening with more Republicans jumping on board, with Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas saying things need to change. He doesn't say exactly how or what or anything.
I think it was interesting to me, he pointed up the hypocrisy of the federal government, in their actions. It's saying, hey, it's okay if it's legalized, hey, but it's still illegal federally, blah, blah, blah. And the same thing, and a lot of people don't know this, is the federal government actually has a patent on cannabinoids.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So on one hand, they're saying, hey, we got a patent on it because it's extremely effective for medical uses. Oh, but we're going to arrest you for it because it's on Schedule 1, it's got no medical uses. So it was really interesting that he pointed out the obvious hypocrisy of all of that.
Definitely. And what was the lawsuit? Do you know anything about the lawsuit?
Well, the lawsuit essentially was saying like any business, okay, that exists, okay, you make revenue from sales, okay, and then you get to deduct any of your expenses, okay, your utilities, okay, your employee wages, all that. You take those off before you get to an income to report on your taxes, and then you tax on that income. Well, with cannabis businesses, you can't do that. You can't deduct any of your normal business expenses. So these businesses that were in legal states, I think Colorado or Oregon, I forget which one, but they're saying, hey, listen, we're being unfairly treated because these other businesses don't have to, they can deduct their expenses, okay? We're a legal business in our state, we can't, there's an inequity there, we want to seek that inequity to be addressed.
We touched on that with the SAFE Act last week too. It's, people think, oh, cash is king, it's great to have all this cash, but when you're paying your employees cash and they're not allowed to report it or can't report it, then they can't get car loans and mortgages and 401ks and, they can't just throw this money.
Yeah, it's a whole cash business too. So now all of a sudden you've got to have armed guards at your store, okay, because there's cash on hand, huge amounts of cash.
Right.
All right. And then, just goes to talk about that one of the canards that they talk about is, in places where they have marijuana dispensaries, crime rate goes up. Well, the only reason it might is because there's a huge amount of cash hanging around there,
Right.
as opposed to normal businesses. But the actual data shows that crime rates go down in those places where they have dispensaries.
Nice.
So the big thing is there's huge inequity and misinformation, disinformation about this entire subject. And a lot of people are realizing, like Schumer and Cora and Booker were saying, they're recognizing the reality that these laws are outdated and ridiculous, and it needs to be changed.
Definitely. And I think it was Senator Wyden, he touched on that they thought the crime rates would go up, when we made it legal, and he said it's done the absolute opposite.
Everything is
gone down.
all the gloom and doom that the prohibitionists have been talking about for decades have not come to fruition. There's no crime increase, okay? There's no drug addiction has actually gone down. Okay, there's no increase in teen usage. So
It's an exit drug,
It's an exit drug.
not a gateway drug, we're finding out.
Yeah.
So yeah, as long as the powers that be can accept that they were wrong, which,
That's probably one of the biggest problems is admitting, hey, we were wrong, we really should be arrested. I think that's a huge driving force, kind of a subconscious one maybe. They don't want to admit they were wrong.
Right,
And they're
right.
wrong. And all the hippies have been telling them marijuana's a good thing. All right.
they're not
okay.
gonna tell you.
They're
you're
not
right.
gonna like that.
Not at all.
All
Not
of
at all. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Jack, for coming in and filling in. I definitely can't do this without, our people that have been fighting the fight for so long.
This is a great opportunity. Neil and I love to talk about cannabis. It's one of our favorite subjects. We've been doing it for a long time. We like to encourage people. The biggest thing, the only thing that really matters, contact your legislators, okay? A lot of people still come up to us when we do events and say, hey, can I sign a petition? Where's the balance? Indiana is not about state. Signing petitions will do nothing, okay? It's against the state constitution to allow a referendum for the citizens to say we want this bill to become law, okay? So the only way that the marijuana change can be done, cannabis reform can be done, is through the legislature. So you need to call your individual legislators, in this case, Senator Todd Young and Senator Mike Braun on the Senate, to contact them and say, listen, you need to consider these bills, you need to support these bills. It's going to eliminate a lot of problems with people getting arrested. It's going to create jobs, it's going to create revenue, and reduce the opioid addiction. So you need to get out there and talk to the legislators, and talk to your officials.
Email them, the IGA.
IGA.IN.IGA.
IGA.IN.gov.
Yeah, like
Go on
that.
there, it's so easy. You click your little legislature, who you want to send it to, you write the note, and then you can go through and click a different legislature. Same note, you don't even have to write the message more than one time. It honestly couldn't be easier.
Yeah.
So, but that's the only way we're going to be able to do it, is with your guys' help.
Exactly.
But again, thanks, Jack. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Denise. Love to do it. I look forward to doing it some other time in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We really do appreciate all of your likes, your shares, your stars, your super chats, all your retweets. Thank you, guys. We really want to make this so that everybody can see it, everybody can get involved, because that's the only way we're going to make change.
Exactly.
So, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.